Which guard is your dude of choice when it comes to building your lineups around? Garion.
Well, I'm glad I get to start.
Yeah.
Because I know Nick Whalen is going to have the same answer as me because this is a DeJounte Murray slate. That's just what it is. The Spurs going up against the Nets, a team that has just decided they will not play defense. They have the fourth worst defensive rating in the NBA in the month of January. They're giving up over 116 points per 100 possessions. And that's translated into the Spurs having one of the highest implied team totals on this slate. And if you're going to give me a plus offensive environment for DeJounte Murray, who across his last 5 games is averaging 1.58 DraftKings points per minute, that's like Giannis Jokic level production. And I don't think we think about Murray in quite that capacity, although maybe we haven't been, but we should be. He's just doing it all for the Spurs right now, and I think you can't ignore him. Just a little bit more expensive than 10K.
Hey, Whalen, is it true? You have the same answer?
Of course. If DeJounte Murray's on the slate, I'm going to consider playing DeJounte Murray. But for the sake of argument here, I'll try to make a case for a couple other guys. You know, I don't mind paying up for Steph Curry tonight against Houston. Kind of got back on track. They ended up losing that game to Indiana. But no Klay Thompson. Of course, still no Draymond Green for Golden State. Could kind of be a one-man show night for Stephen Curry against a bad Houston defense. So, again, I don't mind paying up for him. You know, on the other side of that Spurs-Nets game, you got Kyrie Irving at $9,500. Spurs are 27th against the position this season. I think Kyrie's actually looked really good in his limited action, and most importantly, he's been playing big minutes in every single game. They've taken the training wheels off almost immediately with Kyrie Irving. So both sides, both elite guards in that Spurs-Nets game are appealing, but I really like Fred VanVleet at $8,500. Really nice price, quite a bit cheaper than where he was at even a week or two ago. He's still playing like 42 minutes every single night. You know, we really don't see any other teams or coaches, pushing their starters the way that Nick Nurse does. And VanVleet hasn't been great lately production-wise. He's coming off of like a 4 of 20 shooting night against Dallas on Wednesday. But, getting a guy who's going to play 40 minutes at $8,500, he's a high-usage guard, he has a high ceiling against a bottom 10 defense in the Wizards. It's a pretty appealing situation.
All right, Friar, who do you like? Which guard? Oh, God. No.
Well, I was going to go with DeJounte Murray as well, but obviously everybody's going to be excited about him tonight, given the total on DraftKings Sportsbook, what he did last time out, what he's been doing, and how the Nets do against opposing point guards. I will say another way to back him would be over on DraftKings Sportsbook. His points plus rebounds total is at 28.5 right now. Really like that a lot. The Nets, only 3 teams have allowed more rebounds per game to opposing point guards. But if you want somebody a little bit different, I think Ja Morant is a good play tonight at 9.3K. We saw what he did last time out. The Grizzlies are still very much depleted. I think as long as Desmond Bane is out right now, Ja Morant, and there's another guy who I'm going to talk about in a bit, are players that you need to consider playing on a night-to-night basis because Desmond Bane takes up quite a bit of usage, obviously a good player and everything. So Ja is a good play, but DeJounte is ultimately my favorite guard play tonight.
I'm very happy that Jesse Cofield decided to show up to work today. Who is a forward you like, Friar?
I'm going to stay in that game. And originally, I wasn't thinking Ja Morant was going to be the guy I was going to go off on. I was going to talk more about DeJounte Murray. But in this game, in the Grizzlies-Denver game, my favorite play tonight is Jaron Jackson Jr. at 6.3K. The biggest reason is we saw Ja Morant step up last game. We saw Jaron Jackson Jr. eclipse the 20 field goal attempts mark for the first time this season, last time out. I think that's going to be huge for him tonight. He's still going to get similar volume. Denver is giving up the 6th most points in the paint per game this season, 10th most rebounds per game to opposing power forwards this season. And again, another player prop I like on DraftKings Sportsbook, 23.5 points plus rebounds tonight for Jaron Jackson Jr. over on that.
Tough guy to predict night to night for sure. Whalen, who do you like to build around at forward?
Well, we should start with the usual caveat that never going to steer you away from Giannis. He's at 11.7 tonight, obviously a high price, but a guy who can, is one of the few players in the league who can live up to that. But if you want to talk realistic pricing, Jimmy Butler at 9,400 stands out to me. The Hawks are dead last in defensive rating over their last 10 games. They've been a bottom 5 defense virtually all season. I've really taken no steps to correct that whatsoever. Jimmy Butler got kicked out of the last game. Should be a little fresher for this one. So I like him at 9,400. Kyle Kuzma at 8,000 against Toronto. Been a double-double machine, a rebounding machine of late. Even racking up some blocks. He's flashed 50-plus DraftKings point upside over these last couple weeks, so I don't mind going that direction. And then OG Anunoby at 6,600 on the other side of that matchup. Like Fred VanVleet, like Pascal Siakam, Anunoby's approaching 40 minutes virtually every single night. And again, he hasn't been great lately, some lackluster games, but it's all about the minutes. And if you're locking in a close to elite player in Anunoby at this price, who's probably going to play at minimum 37 minutes, I think that's a pretty good deal.
I love the Butler pick. He's going to be bouncing back after that BS double tech situation. Only played 15 minutes. Kind of got screwed over last time out. Garion, who's a forward you like to build around?
Yeah, I've got Jaron Jackson and Jimmy Butler written down. I think Butler of the two is probably my favorite dollar for dollar play, just because I think the floor is a lot more secure than it is with Jaron. Jackson's ceiling is massive, especially considering what's going on in Memphis right now. But I think we've kind of seen the whole Jimmy Butler experience in his last two games. Goes out and posts a triple-double without Kyle Lowry against the Raptors one day, and then the next day is ejected 15 minutes into a game on some weird kind of stuff. So that's really what you get with Jimmy Butler from time to time. Obviously, the three-point shot has been even worse than usual the past month or so, but that's not why you get Jimmy in a lineup. You get Jimmy in a lineup because he could be the best rebounder the Heat have tonight. He's probably going to run like pseudo point guard instead of Caleb Martin or Gabe Vincent, and he's got the ability to score and get to the free throw line. I think at $9,400, to me, Jimmy's always appealing in these kind of circumstances when he's less than 10K, and he's averaging over 1.3 DraftKings points per minute without Hero and Lowry so far this season. So as long as he stays on the court, I think he's going to have a really good game tonight.
All right, Whalen, which center's going to hold up your lineup tonight? We got two dudes here who absolutely went off a couple nights ago. There was Jokic, who had 93 DK fantasy points, and then Joel Embiid was nearly just as impressive with 77 against Orlando.
Yeah, and Embiid did it in fewer than 30 minutes, which was insane, out-dueling Mo Bamba. But Jokic is at 12,600, which is insane when you consider that's almost $1,000 more than Giannis, who's been as consistent as could possibly be. So I don't know if I'm paying that price tonight. Chances are he's probably not going back-to-back 90-plus DraftKings point games. I'm looking to ex-Wisconsin Herd standout Christian Wood, who is at 8,100 against the Warriors. Normally this is not a matchup that you'd be targeting. And even without Draymond, the Warriors have still been a good defense. They're top 3 in the league in defensive rating over the last 10. But for the time being, I think we need to stop talking about the Warriors as a ultra elite team. They're 4-6 over their last 10 games straight up. They lost to the Pacers last night. In their last 10 games, they are 29th in offensive rating, ahead of only Mo Bamba's Orlando Magic. Steph has not been great for 2 months now. Clay again is out tonight for rest. This is a game where I think the Rockets could potentially stick around, and with no Draymond, I think it's a pretty good spot for Christian Wood.
All right, who's in a good spot tonight, Garion? You going to pay up for any of those dudes north of 11 grand?
You can, obviously. We've talked about Giannis is viable every slate. Jokic is viable every single slate. I do think Jaron Jackson, again, who has center eligibility, coming off like a 35% usage rate. He's someone you always have to consider. But I think, Nick's been talking about it throughout this segment, but I think the Raptors really provide something very interesting at particularly the center position tonight. This is basically like Tecmo Super Bowl, where it wasn't Jim Kelly, it was QB Bills. Just plug in center Raptors, depending on how much money you have left to use a center. Because Pascal Siakam, perfectly viable. He's been, almost averaging a triple-double across his last 5 games. Pseudo point forward kind of stuff for the Raptors, playing, I think he played 44 minutes their last game. And then you've got Chris Boucher, who's also playing like 35 to 38 minutes a night. And we always talk about Boucher as just being one of those guys. If he can get a consistent role, he puts up DraftKings points in bunches. And then below 5K, I think at 4.6, you've got Precious Achiuwa, who's also playing like 35 to 37 minutes per game. Some of that has been to do with Scotty Barnes getting into a little bit of foul trouble in some of these games. And we always have to watch the health of Gary Trent. If he comes back, the Raptors suddenly go to an 8-man rotation. Oh, my God. But I think either one of those 3 guys is viable depending on how much salary you have left for the center position.
All right, Friar, hook us up with the guy at the 5.
So if you're going to go with one of those guys who are 11K plus, I would say Joel Embiid is actually the guy I'm going to go with tonight. I think there's a lot of savings offered there. And the Clippers are, 21st in terms of DK fantasy points allowed to opposing centers, or 9th, depending on how you look at it. But my favorite play tonight is actually going to be Bam Adebayo going up against the Hawks at 7.5K. I know he was a big beneficiary of Jimmy Butler exited early last game. But now that he's back into the mix, getting a little bit more work, he's going up against a Hawks team that is not good against opposing centers. And I don't care if Clint Capella is back tonight or not. Still, they've given up the 7th most DK fantasy points to opposing centers this season, and the Hawks are just outside the top 10 in points in the paint allowed per game this season too.
All right, take us to the value department. As always on DK Nation, Zach Thompson with his top DraftKings NBA DFS bargain plays for January 21st. That's today. Garion, if you were going to build around a value play, who would it be?
I think Zubac is looking really nice tonight, and this is kind of an eerily similar situation to his last game. I'm not saying he's going off for 32 and 10 again. I don't think he's going to go 15 for 19 from the field, but the Clippers were in a matchup with the Nuggets, a team that has an elite all-star MVP level center, and they needed Zubac's size for that entire game. So he plays 37 minutes, and he's been someone who's always been very efficient when he gets his minutes in terms of just grabbing DraftKings points. And now they're going up against the Philadelphia 76ers, who have Joel Embiid. They're going to need someone with size to battle Embiid in the paint. I mean, as long as he's able to stay out of foul trouble, which I know is a considerable thing against Joel Embiid, I think he's going to play over 35 minutes again. And at $4,600, if you're getting someone who averages well over a DraftKings point per minute with that kind of volume, I just think he's someone you can't ignore.
Who is someone you can't ignore in the value department, Whalen?
Jordan Clarkson at 5,800 with no Donovan Mitchell. You're not getting a deep discount there by any means, but pretty big usage boost with Mitchell out of the lineup with that concussion. On the other side of that Bam Adebayo matchup, if Clint Capella doesn't play, is Onyeka Okongwu, who continues to impress me every single night. He actually reminds me of a young Bam Adebayo in a lot of ways. He's got 33 and 41 DraftKings points in his last two, so I like him at 5,400. And then I also throw out Garrison Matthews, 3,700 against Golden State. And if you're following the minutes, Aaron Wiggins for the Thunder at 3,500. He's played 30-plus in each of his last two. Always a dicey rotation to try to predict, but that kind of upside, in terms of minutes for a near min-price guy is pretty solid.
Okay, if you're going to build around a value play, Friar, which guy are you going with?
I like the Clarkson call from my fellow Nick, but my favorite play tonight is actually Monty Morris at 5K versus the Grizzlies. And I know people are going to be looking at him quite a bit because he had that big night against the Clippers last time out, played 45 minutes, overtime battle, all those things. I wouldn't expect him necessarily to get that much production, but I look at what happened last time out, an opposing point guard did against the Grizzlies. George Hill went for 33.5 DK fantasy points, obviously had a much cheaper salary. The Grizzlies are obviously thin at guard. We talked about that a little bit. I know people are looking for value on the opposite side of the matchup, but also consider when they're thin at guard, you want to attack them with guards too. And there are only two teams that have given up more DK fantasy points to opposing point guards than Memphis this season.